Right. My name is Anthony Borton. I'm a Microsoft Visual Studio ALM MVP. So I've been helping people adopt TFS since its release. So I've been working with it since 2004, just before it was announced and available. Has anyone ever done a 2005 installation? Ooh, wasn't that fun? That's got to be the most horrendous experience you could possibly have with a software product. Having done hundreds of them, and even in a classroom, having done setup 10 machines identically, 5 of them would fail for completely different reasons. It was an experience. Fortunately, every subsequent version has improved, and 2012, as you would hope, has become a much more, yay. Good, we're just gonna leave it alone now? Thank you, okay. Hey, we have slides. Cool. Now I'll just break everything I see. I'm having one of those technology days. That's better. Okay, so welcome along to the session. The Accidental TFS Admin Meets 2012. As I was saying, that's a little bit about me. My name's Anthony Borton. By the numbers there, I've been a Microsoft Certified Professional since '93. Who's done any Microsoft exams? Fantastic. Keep your hands up, come on. Put them back up again. Keep your hand up if you've done more than 5. Really, you're all out? So, hey, come on, be proud. There's really only the 2 of us. More than 10? Oh, crap. So I'm the only one without a life. So 55 exams later, as a sign of someone that needs to get a life, not a particularly smart person. So I've done 55 exams. The most recent one has been the TFS 2010 exam. We're expecting or hoping to see probably about 3 exams around the TFS or ALM competencies, probably to be announced somewhere, ideally in the next 4 weeks, is my guess. So a couple of exams coming out. I've been a Microsoft Certified Trainer since '96, so that goes back quite a while. And I've been helping organisations adopt TFS now for, well, that's pretty much all I do since since 2004, 2005. All right, so last year I introduced audiences to the Accidental TFS Administrator. I've got a show of hands to find out exactly where we're all up to, so that's good. What I want to do is I want to take you from this to this. Actually, sorry, there you go, that's better. All right, so we're going to transform you into the TFS Administrator 2012. So specifically, what things are facing the administrator this year? Well, the obvious one at the top, the upgrade experience from 2010 up to 2012. Through other sessions that Adam and Rob have shown us already today, there are plenty of great features in 2012. Things like the agile storyboards, the planning tools are absolutely fantastic. The new developer experience, the new unit test runner, the code review workflow, the feedback client, the storyboarding, there's plenty of great reasons that organizations will look at to upgrade to the 2012 release. So we're going to have a look at that. We also want to look at finally getting off VSS. So if there's anyone there still on VSS, hey, fantastic. You've saved the best till last. Now's the time where you'll actually consider doing the upgrade because it's so much easier than it's ever been before. So no excuses for keeping VSS around. We also want to have a look at maintaining backward compatibility. And again, with every subsequent release Microsoft do, the compatibility bar is raised. 2012, all these numbers, 2012 is the most compatible release they've had. And I've got some slides to talk about that to help you with your staged migrations. We also want to have a look at the new configuration, upgrading project features to 2012. Have a look at a little bit of automation around the configuration of TFS. And I've got a quick demonstration that I'll show you there. I want to do a primer on the permissions of TFS and then finish off with support for teams. So this is a presentation that I've done at TechEd North America and TechEd Europe. They were 75-minute sessions. This is 60 minutes. So what have I done? I've added more slides. So technically speaking, this is death by PowerPoint, but don't get scared. What I've chosen to do is put a lot of content on those slides, knowing that after the conference you can download them. I'm not going to talk through all the points there. I'm going to say, you know what, you had to do this. Look at all those points and click away from it. I don't expect to read them. I'm not going to read them through in the session. But after the event, hopefully that'll provide a really good reference for you and some good pointers. So don't get too concerned about the volume of PowerPoint. We'll be doing plenty of demos as well. All right, let's get started. The upgrade experience. So first and foremost, if you've got 32-bit operating systems, if your current TFS server is sitting on 32-bit, you're in a world of hurt. Okay, the red means pain. There's Windows Server 2008 R2 with no service pack is not supported. That's an easy one. You just apply the service pack and you're back in business. So really, the summary of the slide there is you've got to be 64-bit to upgrade. And sadly, many of you will know, you can't in-place upgrade a 32-bit operating system to 64-bit. So you're pretty much going to look at a migration-based upgrade. If you're looking, with regard to SQL Server, SQL 2008 R2 or SQL Server 2012 are supported. So you may have to consider a SQL upgrade if you're still sitting on SQL 2008. Okay, so that one's not too bad. And, well, they support pretty much every SharePoint, or at least from 2007 forward, let's be specific. So SharePoint won't be a big issue for us. That's probably something that we'll want to upgrade usually. So your migration options, you've got an in-place upgrade. So who's done an in-place upgrade before? So that's probably the path of least resistance. That's where we have our TFS server today, and we want to simply upgrade it in place to the latest version. Your other choice is a migration-based upgrade, where we want to have a second TFS server, the new one, and we want to upgrade as part of a migration of content across. Now that's a slide that usually gets you kicked straight out of trainer school, but it's a slide taken from the Visual Studio ALM Ranges upgrade guidance. And again, I don't want to go through all of the details there, but what it does for you is on the left-hand side here, we see all of the different configurations you may have today, and it simply maps across and tells you what options you've got. Do we need to do an in-place upgrade, or is that a possibility? Or is a migration-based upgrade our only choice here? Okay, so basically look to see where you are over there, follow the lines across, and find out what options are available to you. Okay, so again, I'm not going to talk through all those points. The in-place upgrade is pretty good. In looking at the guidance, a little bit of advice. Best Practices Analyzer is your friend. So while the Visual Studio Ranges guidance walks you through all the checklists, puts all the points there, let me summarize the experience for you. Run or install the power tools if they're not there. Now, most of you guys administer TFS. You've owned up to it. Who's run a Best Practices Analyzer scan in the last 4 weeks? Okay. Keep your hand down if you should have. Okay, you get my point? So the BPA tool is certainly your friend. Okay, the Best Practices Analyzer is part of the power tools. It's something that you should run every 4 to 6 weeks on a TFS server. Every subsequent release of those power tools will update the rules and the information inside that BPA tool. So run it. It tells you all manner of things about the health of TFS. So a great proactive tool. You can run it anytime you like during the day. It's non-invasive, or non-disruptive is probably a better way of saying it. Okay. Even setting up a scheduled task to go and run it and output the results somewhere for you is a great choice. Okay. But coming back, sorry? Can you run it for just a team project collection? I've never tried. Has anyone tried doing that? Every time I've run it, I've simply gone in there and set a TFS server health check and pointed it at the whole box and let it wander along. I don't know if logically you'd want to do it just as at a TPC. Okay, but I honestly haven't tried either. So run the Best Practices Analyzer. Once that shows everything is healthy, and if there's something that it finds that is unhealthy, fix it. Then consider the upgrade or the service pack or whatever you're doing. In almost every instance of someone having a problem with an upgrade or a service pack or something, it was a pre-existing problem made worse by the upgrade or the service pack. Okay, so make sure it's nice and clean, then do whatever you need to do, then run the BPA tool after the upgrade to make sure everything's okay again. But fundamentally, it's a case of jump into control panel, I'm jumping ahead. Back up, do a trial restore. Best practices analyzer. Then into control panel, add remove programs, highlight 2010, uninstall it. That's a pretty scary moment. So that's going to remove TFS 2010, but it'll leave all the databases there. The configuration database will have all the information that it needs, and of course all your source files, work items, and so on will all be saved in the databases. You'll then put in the TFS 2012 media. You'll do a standard install. Then when it comes up to configuration, you'll say, I want to do an upgrade install, and it'll say, where's the database? It'll then install TFS, configure TFS, it'll update the schema in place for you, and hey presto, there's a 2012 box. And if your server is healthy, then really that's what the experience looks like. Okay? So the couple of you that said you're running 2012, did you do in-place upgrades? That's a no. Anyone else? Yep. How was the experience? Did I oversell it? Yeah, good, thank you. It would have been really bad if you said it was terrible, by the way. So that's what the experience should look like. Did you run the BPA tool before you started? Yep. Oh, you're a legend. All right. Sam, have you done any Microsoft exams before? Yep. Would you like to do another one? Yep. Fantastic. Have a free voucher. Do the TFS 2012 exam and tell me how you go. It's not available yet. The migration-based upgrade is a lot more versatile. So the migration-based upgrade is the story where we've got a brand new server, and then we're simply going to move things across. And of course, if it's a 2010 box, we've got our team project collections. We can simply detach the collection, pull it out of SQL, move it onto the new hardware, stick it into SQL, reattach it, and that will automatically do the in-place upgrade of that TPC for us on the new hardware. Now, it's not quite that seamless. You've then got to reattach things like our reports. You've got to reattach the build infrastructure, reattach any of the lab management that you had in place before. So there's a couple of extra things. It's like that, it's a heart transplant. You chop all the vessels off, move the heart across, reattach all the vessels again. Probably needs to pick a less gruesome analogy there, really. Once you've done that migration, you may need to do things to do with SharePoint. So copying across the SharePoint content and rewiring up those portals is probably something you'll need to do. A couple of post-migration things to consider. The reports aren't upgraded automatically. SharePoint needs to be re-established, and all of your team projects will be at pre-2012 functional level. A little bit more on that to come. Some resources to help you plan and execute that upgrade. So again, just follow the installation guide. The installation guide has saved us countless hours and countless grey hairs. So the installation guide you can pull down straight from the web, and it is also on the installation media. So follow that guide, life's going to be a lot easier for you. For more detail on the upgrade though, certainly have a look at that URL. The ALM ranges have given us personas, they've given us various scenarios, they've given us exhaustive checklists to help you go through that upgrade hopefully as smoothly as possible. So those two things should make your upgrades a heck of a lot less stressful. In the interest of time, I'm not going to open up that PDF. This is a virtual demo. I open up a PDF, it's the Ranger guidance. I look at the table of contents and say, there's plenty of great stuff, and you get excited. Okay, we'll call that a given. Thank you. All right, we've got more interesting things to have a look at. Upgrading from SourceSafe. Wow, that's not the segue I wanted. More interesting things to look at, SourceSafe. Who would have thought? So, upgrading from Visual SourceSafe to TFS 2010, or to move that content across. Who's ever done that one? Excellent. What was your experience with it like? Do you remember?
Too bad.
Yeah.
The lack of the ability to put multiple projects in the same.
So the restructuring of content as you went across was a disaster. Yeah. How was your experience?
That was easy. It was so good that they made me do a tool in TechEd a couple of years ago.
But is it fair to say it was easy, really? Was it in any way intuitive?
I'm a developer, so for me it was easy.
Okay, that's fair. So the feedback there is for a developer or someone that is quite comfortable and familiar with playing with XML files and command line tools, it wasn't so bad. Is that true? And I'd have to agree with that. It was reasonably involved. I've had analyze processes take over 30 hours to complete for huge source safe databases. And then it comes back with 30,000 errors, which is really probably about 20 errors many, many, many times. Correct, then you've got to fix it, and it can be an extraordinarily time-consuming process just depending on how big those source-safe databases are. So for those of you that are still sitting on SourceSafe, I've got some great news. All of that horror, don't believe him when he says this one was easy. All of that horror is a thing of the past, okay? Why it's a thing of the past is we've got a new tool, a new wizard they've introduced. It was only introduced in the release to manufacture, the RTM version of 2012. So if you've looked at any of the betas, the release previews, you will not have seen this. Let me show you what it looks like. It sounds like cheating. It is cheating. And let's face it, those few hands that were up there, you should be enormously grateful for this. So you go into the TFS administration console, you'll see a new thing up there that's highlighted. You'll select that and download the little wizard. Inside the wizard, you'll point to where SourceSafe is and give it the password. You'll choose the projects you want to bring across. The next step will say, where do you want to put it? The interesting thing is, look at the URL there. It can import that directly into the cloud-hosted TFS or to an on-premise TFS, your choice completely. Okay? So you choose that, where you're going to put the information. Do you want the full history or simply a tip migration? That's just a checkbox option for you now, A or B. The next choice is, we've got to tell it or give it an instance of SQL that it can use during that migration process. So we go in there and just use SQL Express, click Next. It does all the work and says, there you go. That's so much better. For any of you that have done the VSS migration before, playing around with XML configuration files, user mapping files, all that sort of stuff, this is a much nicer choice. So all those hands that said VSS, this is great, and you should do it. Okay? You haven't got a lot of capability there to restructure it, the issue that you mentioned that you had. So you can't go in there and you haven't got a lot of flexibility in how you map those things into the new repository now, sadly. There may be another way of doing it too. So there may be some options behind that wizard that we can use. I'll have to have a look at that. If you want to come and have a look after the talk, I'm more than happy to have a look at that with you.
Is it still just a replay with the chickens, so you lose the original base of time, or they?
Well, you didn't really lose them, they just changed place. Yeah, that hasn't changed. I mean, and that is fundamentally the structure of the tools. So, we didn't lose the original date and time, they were added as into the comment, which was, yeah. It's just the way it was. The converter's still there if you want to use it. Yeah. You really liked that converter, didn't you? No, they don't need to exist. I mean, but it's entirely up to you how you want that handled. It's not really a technical problem. It's more of a, when Fred left 5 years ago and, he was busy while he was here, what do you want that to show if anyone's looking back at that history? Yeah. And I haven't done a lot of that conversion recently. I'm a bit rusty with it, I've got to say. Okay? I don't want to give you wrong advice there. Okay? Maintaining backward compatibility. So firstly, side-by-side isn't a bad experience at all. They've often talked about it. The good news is that side-by-side experience really delivers this time. If you're looking at 2010, with 2010, we've got the ability to download. You've got to have Service Pack 1. I should preface the statement by that. You must put Service Pack 1 on, then you simply download a small GDR, apply that, and your 2010 clients, Visual Studio and so forth, can talk seamlessly to the 2012 server. Okay, so that's good news for us. Something else that I'll mention is that at least half of the project types are completely compatible now. So if you were there for the upgrade from 2008 to 2010, in 2010, if you went and opened, say, a web application that was created in 2008, what was your only choice? It was to upgrade it. So it went in there and modified the SLN and the proj files and changed information there so it could then not be opened by any 2008 users. So for half the project types, give or take, that doesn't exist now. So you'll be able to have half the team on 2010, half the team on 2012, and they can open and close the same projects. That doesn't, no, not for 2008. Okay. The compatibility story is not quite the same. But the short answer to that question is yes, you will. Okay, so from 2008, you'll open it in 2012. 2012 will say we have to upgrade this. And once that's done, the 2008 people can't open it. I mean, that's the project type with Visual Studio.
But can Visual Studio still connect if we do it, say, migration upgrade?
Yes.
It can still connect to TFS.
Absolutely. So the very next slide there. So 2008 also has its own GDR. So if you've got Visual Studio 2008, again, you must have Service Pack 1, download the GDR, and that GDR then talks seamlessly back to a TFS 2012 server. Okay, so the compatibility story there with 2008 and 2010 from a TFS perspective is actually very good. So the question was, you've had some hit and misses where the 2010... yes. Okay, so where the 2008 clients can't always reliably see a 2010 server, I believe that's been quite improved. Okay, I mean, I haven't had enough clients in that situation yet to talk specifically about that, but I think I'm aware of what you were talking about. Yeah, I think you're going to have some good news there. And of course, through the MISCI provider or the Microsoft Source Control Client Interface, the MISCI provider is still there for us. So pretty much if I summarize by saying anything that could talk to SourceSafe can talk to TFS. Okay, and there's plenty of options up there. So effectively you just download the MISCI provider, install the MISCI provider where you have any of those, and now you'll be able to check in, check out directly into a TFS 2012 server for version control and work item. Okay. Sorry, say again, you don't have... It's built in. Yeah. Again, anything that could talk to SourceSafe, so that's all your Office products, Access, those kinds of things, yeah, it's definitely there. All right.
There will be some functionality that's unlocked inside Visual Studio. So if you went from 2010 to TFS 2012, will be something you can't do.
There will be, yes. Okay. I mean, that's just the nature of the tool. The 2012 one is more sophisticated with more features in there. All right, feature enablement. So in terms of feature enablement, for those of you that have upgraded from 2008 to 2010, upgrading the server was one thing, but all of your projects stayed at the 2008 functional level. True? Now, if you have a look at some of the compelling reasons why you'd want to change. People wanted to move to 2010 for what reasons? Are these the ones all on the board? Yeah, of course. So it's not really a challenging question for you, is it? So hierarchical work items, support for test cases were really big things. The agile planning tools in terms of those spreadsheets maybe were seen as compelling back then, not anymore. Lab management, branch visualization, there were plenty of great features. Unfortunately, after you upgraded the server from 2008 to 2010, these didn't magically appear for any existing projects. Who's been involved in going back and modifying existing projects to enable those features? It wasn't fun, and it was very time consuming. And it was following many pages of instructions very carefully on each team project to make sure you got it right. True? On a fun scale of 1 to 10, where 10's just ecstatic, where was it? It was a 0. It It wasn't quite, that painful. I'd probably give it a 1 or a 2. It wasn't a lot of fun. You had to do all these kinds of things, handcrafting XML, mucking around, running scripts, very manual and nasty and horrible. You can read that later if you're interested. Hopefully you'll never need to do it. Okay? So the step up to 2012, what does it look like? Well, first and foremost, we get some things for free. So as soon as we do that in-place upgrade, existing team projects will get this. Our description field finally changes its type from plain text to HTML. Woohoo! I know it's such a little thing, but such an important thing at the same time. We can insert inline images through any of those HTML fields now. We pick up merge on save for work items. So if 2 people are editing the same source file, one guy saves it, checks it in first, the next guy gets a conflict, he can resolve it. What about work items? In 2008, that wasn't a great experience. 2010 didn't change it. In 2012 now, we have support for these things. So if someone's editing a work item, you try and edit the same one, on save it'll detect that conflict and give you resolution options. That's pretty good. Our history tab now contains discussion only and all changes, so we've got a little bit more filtering capability in history. We pick up, actually this isn't a pickup, they've renamed team queries to shared queries. That's just a little thing. Each team project is automatically assigned a default team. We're going to talk about teams towards the end of the session. And then finally, the virtual directory's changed its name from web to TFS. So it just happens, you've got to do nothing for it. You also lose a few things for free. Does that make you feel good and excited? Yeah, I know, I'm trying to dress that up. You can no longer create folders in my favorites. Who did that? Yeah, a lot? It'd be nice if they stayed, but guys, they're gone. You just simply can't do it. If you did not have a TFS client access license, you could access something called work item only view users group. You could put people in there. That whole thing's gone now. Okay, we've changed that into a server-side licensing model, which I'll demonstrate to you shortly. Several functions have been deprecated in Team Web Access. So it's simply to say that they don't appear inside that web UI, but the functionality is still available elsewhere. You can no longer drag and drop documents and reports into my favorites if you ever did that. Those Excel workbooks, the iteration and backlog planning workbooks, if you really got into those, they're not supported anymore. There's much better choices. You wouldn't want to stick with them. And then finally, any custom controls you've written for previous versions generally won't work. It could be a simple case of simply updating the references, recompiling them against the 2012 object model, and that's going to work just fine for you, generally. So the really exciting things. The upgrade to 2012 gives us agile planning tools. Now again, if you saw Adam's session this morning, or if you saw Rob's session, you will have seen things like the task board, the drag and drop task board. You'll have seen the real-time burn down charts. You would have seen all of those tools to help us manage the backlog, manage the sprint, and manage our day-to-day stand-ups and so forth. We really want those features. We want the code review workflow. We want to pick up feedback. We want the work items that go with those feedback requests and response. You want the storyboard integration. Okay, did we see storyboarding today? One of the guys, I think Rob would have shown you that today. Hopefully you did. So being able to go and rapidly prototype those things in a tool as easy as PowerPoint would have been a very, is an attractive feature. And there's a couple of hidden type categories as well. Now again, that's not a big selling point, but if we were doing it manually, this is something you'd have to worry about. Things like you don't want to be able to create code review requests and responses by going right-click on a work item and saying new. These work item types are designed purely to be created by a tool. Okay, so there's a category there that differentiates those for us. So we want that. But then doing these things previously has been an absolute disaster and a pain in the behind. So what's it look like in 2012? Absolutely, you can, yes. All right, so I'm just going to duck in here. I'm going to open up Visual Studio 2012. Now what I've got in here is I've got a project called Agile V5. It is a team project that's been created from 2010 using the Agile 5 template. In other words, it doesn't have any of the new features and capabilities that we want in 2012. I'm just going to switch across to Team Explorer. Okay, so I'm going to go and request a code review, simply choosing a feature that doesn't exist or did not exist in this team project. Let's see what happens. So what it's done is it pops up and says, to request a code review from your peers, enable the new features. Conversely, if I jump across to, I'll go back to home, go into my web access, go into administration. And what you'll see over here is that features are available for the team project, but they must be configured before you can use them. In other words, wherever you go, whatever tool you're using, if it identifies a feature that you're trying to use that does not exist in the current team project, it gives you a hyperlink. It gives you a choice. Don't care which way we do it. Let's close out of there. Let's do it this way. I'll click that hyperlink, and the feature enablement wizard starts. How many hours did you spend doing this before? It was hours and hours, potentially days to get this right. And there were always those couple of things you missed. So a week later, you're going back and you're tweaking the 2010 things to enable them. So what it's done is it says, well, look, these are the features that were found that aren't currently enabled for this team project. I'll say, yep, go and check those out for me. It goes in and looks at the missing features. It looks to try and find the most compatible process template that has the definitions. Now, to be very clear, we are not changing from one process template to another. You can't do that. All it's doing is saying that we've got the old 2010 capabilities and we've found a template that contains the settings and the configuration that would enable these features for us that should be a pretty tight fit for your existing team project. Now, to be very clear, this is conservative. It has to be. We're talking schema changes. So if you have heavily customized your own process template, this tool will have one look and say, you know what, I'm not going to do it for you. It has to be conservative. And then here's a list of all the instructions and you're back to doing it manually. Okay? It can't be magic. Okay, so again, it's just that level of customization. The good advice is, well, give it a go. And if it feels confident to do it, it'll do it. If it looks at your template and goes, then you've really lost nothing except for the next day of your time. And that's what we've always done from 2005 to 8, 8 to 10, so yeah. But I'm just going to say configure now. 1, 2, and 3, and we're done. Again, for those of you that have done this from 2005 to 8, 8 to 10, that have spent all the hours tweaking little things, that's absolutely extraordinary. So this team project now has all of those new features enabled for us. So I'll dive back out of here, jump in here, do a quick refresh of the metadata, and I'll request a code review. You think it didn't work. So the feature is actually enabled here. The error that it's giving me is I've got no pending changes. So I've got nothing to do a code review on. But the feature, the functionality is most certainly there. So all of those features in our upgraded team projects have suddenly, lit up after we've run that enablement wizard. That's a neat feature. So for those of you that are considering that upgrade to 2012 sometime in the next several months, if you've got one or more team projects, that was going to be quite a lot of work and effort for you to light those features up. Now it's just a case of popping in through the web UI or any of the UIs and go and running that feature enablement wizard. If you haven't done a lot of customization, Yuld, I can't remember his last name, Yuld, one of the Microsoft guys that wrote this, on his blog has given you a PowerShell script so you can iterate through all team projects and automatically do this. So I can find you that URL for anyone that's interested in having a look at it. But feature enablement is a very neat feature.
We've recently gone from 2005 to 2010.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't tweaked our project yet.
Mm-hmm.
If we went to 2012, we'd fix them along the way, but we need to get up to 2010 standards first.
B. Option A was the answer you really, really wanted. But if your functional level is 2005 or 2008, it can't do the upgrade for you. the feature enablement wizard will solely move from 2010 to 2012. And I wish that was a better answer. I'm sure you do too. Did I do that? Cool. So that talks about exactly what that tool did. I want to look at some new configuration automation. And while we were waiting for everything to get ready, guess who forgot to get his little cheat sheet out? How? It's those command lines that I simply can't commit to memory. I apologise. So let me get my cheat sheet there. That was going to be surreptitiously hidden there before you guys walked in. There's nothing secret about it now. So I want to talk about the new unattended options. Now this isn't necessarily something that will be of interest to everyone. But basically it means that from a command line, we can now do a lot in terms of TFS configuration and administration. We can do things like go and say, I want to go and provision a new build controller and a couple of build agents, please. And you can do this quite easily from a command line. Now, it's not to say that if it's a one-off on a single server back in the office, you're going to worry about this. The answer is you won't. You'll use the GUIs to do it. But if there is any need for you to do this in a repetitive manner, the new unattended options available through the command line are very attractive to us. So I'm going to give you a quick look at one of them. Some of the things we can do there: reinstall app tiers, configure build services, install SharePoint for us, configure any characteristics of our version control, work item tracking, and so on. Let's have a quick look at that. So if I go into here, have a look at administration. I'm going to show you that in terms of build, we have no build infrastructure. We have no controllers or agents registered with this TPC. True, we really, really didn't. I didn't change anything, I promise. Okay. Probably. You do the magic. So, unfortunately, what you're about to see there, and if any of the demos was going to go pear-shaped, then this one's one we can probably do without. All I was going to do is drop into a command line. Now, if you've ever done unattended installs before, be it an operating system or some such, creating the input file, the XML file, is usually the challenge. So what I was going to do was go in there and type in tfs config space unattend. Then I was going to go and select /create. Then I was going to put type build because I want to install build infrastructure. And then I was going to tell it the name of the unattended file, create.ini. When you press enter, it creates that file. It creates, whatever you wanted to call it, create.ini. It's an XML, actually no, it's not XML. It's a text file that has all of the settings that you can feed in. It has comments in there and it has logical defaults. It would have said that I was going to install 4 build agents. I was going to go and change that to just 1, just to make it quicker. I was going to scroll down and it was going to say, do you want to use the built-in service account? And we all know that for build infrastructure, network service is a disaster. So I was going to change that and I was going to provide the credentials for the build, an account for the build services to run under, and I was going to provide a password. And I was just going to skim down there to say, well, look, here's all the settings, all commented and documented for you. And then we were going to save it. I was going to go back and run the same command line again, but instead of telling it to create that ini file, I was going to go in there and tell it to go in there and use that ini file. And then it was going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. It was going to install the build infrastructure, which was going to take all of about several seconds. And then it was going to take about 3 minutes to write the log file. So I was going to Alt-tab away from that, which is quite ironic. It takes seconds to set up all the build infrastructure and then much, much longer to tell us what it did. It's quite interesting. But nonetheless, within just a matter of moments, that would have deployed all of the build infrastructure for a team project collection for us, which is a nice new feature. But again, if it's just a one-off for you back in the office, stick to the GUIs. We can work with that. Now, in the interest of the remaining 12 minutes, I'm not going to worry about that demonstration. That was sadly a virtual demo for you. More than happy to show it to anyone that's interested in that automation when we're done. Okay. Permissions and security. So in the area of permissions and security, just a quick primer, and I'm talking about a very quick primer. So again, we're assuming that you're already familiar with this stuff. If you remember back to 2010, that's what most of you are using. One of the biggest issues is highlighted here. The perception that when we look at this screen, because it is TFS at the top, we are looking at TFS, when in fact that is not the case. We are making, a number of those nodes are directly from TFS, but some of the information displayed there is coming live from SharePoint and live from SQL reporting services. We're doing integrated authentication requests against those products to populate what you see in the tree there. And of course, what that leads to is if someone goes into Team Explorer, goes into the team project and says, I want to go and add Fred to this team project as a contributor, that's what Fred sees. Those two nasty little crosses just there. And the reason for that was it is literally security in 3 places. The key fact is people just didn't know that you need to manage security in those 3 places. It was 3 different UIs. Managing those was time consuming, and trying to remember each of the different places to do it was frustrating. And then the names of the permission sets across those 3 products were inconsistent as well, just to make it worse. So there was little wonder we got security quite wrong in 2010. Our default team project groups, administrators, contributors, builders and readers, they remain the same in 2012. Now the way that you really wanted to set this up, and hopefully you have, is you wanted to leverage Active Directory. If I created a new team project called payroll, then I would go in and I would create 4 groups corresponding to those built-in team projects. I'd go in there and put the appropriate users into those groups. And then this is a horrible slide, but this is showing us that for each of those 4 groups, we'd then go and put them into the appropriate product using the 3 horrible interfaces and so on. Okay? Now don't worry about that, that's how it is or was in 2010. Hopefully you also downloaded that wonderful little tool from Codeplex, and that wonderful little tool made short work of it. What you'd do is you'd connect your TFS server, it would go out to the 3 different products, and it would report the security configuration for us. Great for diagnosing misconfiguration of security. You could also then go in there and say add users, and you could put those AD groups in. You could select the permission set for TFS, and it would know what the corresponding permission sets were in reporting services and SQL. And then you'd go down here and there'd be a commit button, and that would go and make those changes. Who's using the tool today? Wow. For those of you that aren't, perhaps security is not something that you need to be concerned with. But if you are, then that's an absolutely fantastic little tool. It's a tiny download from Codeplex. I think it's like 1.5 meg, and it will save you enormous amounts of time and effort. So the bad news. Well, firstly, before I go past that, everything I've spoken about security in 3 places, about having to go and manage SharePoint and SQL and TFS, that remains unchanged. It's one of the #1 things we're hoping for, a single consolidated permission and security console for TFS. It's not there in 2012. So the kind of good news is this tool still works, which is good news, but it hasn't been recompiled against 2012 yet. So in order to make this tool work with 2012, you've got to put on the 2010 Team Explorer, you've got to put on Service Pack 1, and you've got to put on that GDR. And that's what you need to do to get Team Explorer 2010 to talk to a 2012 box. So once you've done that, this tool is still the best tool to use for managing security for team projects. Okay, so it hasn't changed. A couple of changes. So management of security has moved though. So in terms of the TFS side of things, most security now is managed through the web UI. Surprising, well, actually probably not surprising. Many of the administrative interfaces that were familiar or that we've used before, using Windows forms and so on, they've now suddenly appeared as web UIs. And why is that? It's because of Microsoft's hosted TFS offering, TFS Preview. Who's using TFS Preview so far? Wow, Okay, had a bit of a look. So that's shameless self-plug for a session tomorrow morning. So I'm going to talk about Microsoft's hosted TFS. At the moment it is completely free. You simply go to a URL, you log on with your live ID, and you will get a 2012 team project collection in the cloud. You'll open up Team Explorer, you'll point to it, and you'll get source control, check-in, check-out, work item tracking, agile planning tools. It's all pretty cool. So Microsoft's hosted TFS service, I'm talking about that tomorrow, taking your ALM to the cloud. So with that in mind, that might give you some insight into why most of the UI has now been moved across into a web interface. It's to give a similar experience, whether it's on-premise or a hosted TFS offering. You've got some project collection level groups there that haven't changed. You can administer it in a number of different tools. Our server level permissions haven't changed, or our server level groups. Our team project, our contributors and readers and builders, that hasn't changed, but there is a new group there to support the use of teams, which I'm going to talk about shortly. So again, the good news there is most of this hasn't changed. For better or worse, it's something that we should be familiar with. There's a couple of new features there, and I'm mindful of our slow start. I want to try and finish on time. Let me just switch back over here. I'm just going to go into web access. So this is Fabric M5. You've seen this web access hopefully in one of the sessions already today. So I'm going to go across and switch to the administrative interface. And again, what you're seeing here by default are our teams. I'm just going to drop back down to the Fabric M5 collection. Okay, I'm going to go into security there, and I'm going to click on users in the top left-hand corner. So one of the really nice things that we're able to do now, I'll give you a scenario. Brian Keller has managed test environments as a permission. Why? How did he get that permission? So one of the nice things that we're able to do now is I can go and find Brian. I can have a look at what his permissions are. I can change his permissions simply by going in here and toggling through those options. But one of the other really nice features is I can move over some of these. And see the little Y hyperlink? I click on that, and that's going to tell me why Brian has those rights and permissions. So Brian has picked up that inherited right through his membership, in this case, of those two groups. Conversely, it could be a deny. Maybe we're giving it to him in 3 groups, but then we've put a deny on another group, and that's where he loses it. So going back and auditing security, seeing those permissions, is now all done quickly and easily through that web UI. Now there's plenty of other choices there. We haven't got time to go through the permissions. The takeaway from that talk there is to simply say that security is a heck of a lot better and easier, and mostly managed now through the web for us. Now this is different. This is just the TFS side. It doesn't change my conversation about security in 3 places: TFS, SharePoint, and reporting services. I'm going to cut that demo a little bit short there. Our web access permissions. So this one I will really call out to you. So remember, we could go to our team web access in 2010 and you could do whatever you wanted to do. In 2012, they've changed this. In 2012, there is a server licensing model. And your choices are limited, so that's no cal, standard, or if your user has either Premium, Visual Studio Premium, Visual Studio Ultimate, or Microsoft Test Professional, then they're entitled to this experience here. If the end user is not licensed at that level, then they're not allowed to request and manage feedback, and they don't get the agile planning capabilities. So this is quite a change. So I want to show you what that looks like, because the default can sometimes cause some grief. So I'm just going to go back up to Control Panel up here, and let's pick a scenario. So of our 50 users of TFS, 48 of them have either Premium, Ultimate, or Test Professional. So I want to make the default the full experience. But then for the couple of people that only have Pro, I want to make sure will only see what they're licensed to see. Now, it could have gone the other way. It could have been the majority are going to be on limited, and there's only a couple that get the full experience. It doesn't matter which way you want to go with it. So if I go in here, we see limited, standard, and full. Full is the default. And then I'm going to go back to standard, and I'm going to say that as far as standard goes, Brian and Julia should only get that limited set of features. Okay? So in this particular example, it shows what features they do and don't get, and this one gives you the full experience. So if I go back out of here, I'm logged on as Julia, and if I do a refresh, it's now telling me that some of the features are not available to this user. It's seeing that Julia's logged on. Julia isn't licensed for one of those full experiences, so certain capabilities are now removed from that web UI. Okay, so that's something that is completely new, that experience for us. Sorry? So the TFS cal, the cal by itself, is going to give you the standard. Okay, the one below that, the limited one, is no cal, and then of course those 3 products that I mentioned, that's how you get the full experience there. All right, Teams in a minute. Interesting. Teams is a very, very new concept. I'm not going to do it any justice in the time that I have available. But I guess what I wanted to say there is Teams, if you had a look at contributors, we could have had 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 contributors on a team project. And that's a lot of people to manage. Invariably, what we did was we broke them up and we set up areas for them. Those areas could have been, the Auckland office and the Wellington office. The areas could have been testers and developers and DBAs. And we used areas to do that. Microsoft have taken that a little bit further, and they've introduced the idea of teams within team projects. So what that allows us to do is to grab a subset of our contributors, call them a team, which we probably already are, but then they have their own product backlog, they have their own burn down, and their own task boards. Technically, they can have different sprint iterations if you want to go as far as doing that, although I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. So Teams is fantastic. It allows us to have the concept of a master backlog that comes down and then gets fed into different teams to do that work. It's really quite powerful. One thing to call out, adding a person to a team, it's only for the purpose of their of the backlog, of their task boards and so forth. It's not a security concept. So adding Julia in this case into a team puts her into contributors but will not touch these other 2. So guys, I'm sorry I can't do a little bit more justice to Teams there. They're an excellent feature. The challenge there is realizing that you've got security at its first and foremost, that hasn't changed, and Teams, which is this new subdivision which gives us autonomous backlogs and things, which is really, really nice. So I can't demonstrate that to you. Power Tools, the Power Tools haven't been released for 2012 yet. There is a beta version for, Dev 11 as it was called, that will work for the 2012 RTM today. The full RTM of those Power Tools hopefully can't be more than a week away is my hope and guess. All right, so hopefully you've learned a little bit about 2012. I apologise for the bumpy start to get us kicked off there, and I've had to shorten a couple of little demos for you. We've talked about a few of the things that will face TFS administrators in 2012. Hopefully you'll have a nice smooth upgrade experience that is better than it's ever been before. Hopefully that looks like you now. Some sessions, I am going to talk about TFS in the cloud tomorrow, and hopefully we'll have some exams coming up soon. There's some contact details. Don't forget the launch event at CodeCamp this weekend. Whoops, that's that slide there. Don't forget to do your evals, and thank you very much for your patience this afternoon.